The red dust rose in clouds behind the approaching car, and Halima's heart rose with it. She stood at the edge of the village path she'd swept twice that morning, her best Ankara wrapper tied with precision, her headscarf arranged the way Sadiq always said made her look like royalty. Around her, the village had transformed, palm fronds decorated the compound gates, children in their cleanest clothes waited with curious eyes, and Mama Binta had slaughtered a goat that now roasted over an open fire, filling the air with the promise of celebration. 1,526 days. That's how long it had been since Sadiq left for the city. Halima had counted every single one. The car, a sleek black sedan that looked out of place against the backdrop of mud houses and cassava farms, slowed as it approached. Halima's hands trembled against her wrapper. She'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, the way she'd run to him, the way he'd lift her and spin her around, the way the village would erupt in celebration as their long-awaited reunion finally happened. The engine cut. The driver's door opened. Sadiq stepped out, and Halima's breath caught. He looked different, taller somehow, though that was impossible. His shirt was crisp and white, his trousers pressed with military precision, his shoes so polished they caught the afternoon sun like mirrors. Even from 20 feet away, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and foreign that erased every memory of the boy who used to smell like rain and farm soil. Their eyes met across the dusty path. Halima smiled, took one step forward. Then Sadiq turned back to the car and opened the passenger door. A hand emerged first, delicate, with painted nails the color of wine. Then a leg, wrapped in fabric too tight for village propriety, ending in a high heel that seemed designed to mock the very earth it touched. Finally, a woman unfolded herself from the car, her sunglasses covering half her face, her weave cascading down her back like imported silk. The woman didn't look at Halima. Didn't look at the village or the decorations or the roasting goat. She looked only at Sadiq, her glossed lips curved in a smile that said she owned something Halima had merely been borrowing. Sadiq took her hand, that delicate, painted hand, and helped her navigate the uneven ground with the kind of careful attention Halima remembered from a lifetime ago. "Welcome home, my son." Mama Binta rushed forward, her arms already open for embrace. Sadiq hugged his mother, but his hand never left the city woman's. "Mama," he said, his voice carrying a polish that matched his shoes, "I want you to meet someone. This is Aisha. My fiancé." The word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of shock through the gathered crowd. Halima stood frozen on her swept path, her finest Ankara suddenly feeling like rags, her carefully arranged headscarf like a costume from a play that had been cancelled without anyone telling her. 1,526 days of waiting. And he'd brought home someone else's future, 5 years earlier. The Iroko tree had stood at the edge of Halima's village for longer than anyone could remember, its branches thick enough to shade half the market square, its roots so deep the old people said they touched the bones of ancestors. It was under this tree that promises were made, because promises spoken in the shadow of something eternal had weight. Had meaning. Had consequences. "I'll come back for you," Sadiq said, his hands holding Halima so tightly she could feel his pulse racing against her palms. 2 years. Maybe 3. Just long enough to finish my apprenticeship and save enough money. Then I'll return and we'll have the biggest wedding this village has ever seen. Halima nodded, though tears were already blurring her vision. The sun was setting behind the Iroko tree, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that felt too beautiful for a moment this painful. "You promise?" Her voice broke on the word. "I swear it." Sadiq reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside was a bracelet, simple wooden beads strung together, nothing expensive, nothing impressive. But he'd carved each bead himself during the dry season, walking by lamplight after long days in his father's workshop. "Wear this. And when you look at it, remember that every day I'm gone is one day closer to coming home." He tied it around her wrist. The beads were warm from being in his pocket, warm like the promise itself. "What if you forget me?" Halima whispered. "What if the city changes you?" "The city can't change who I love." Sadiq pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "You are my foundation, Halima. My roots. Everything I build in the city, I'm building for us. For the life we'll have together." They stood like that until the sun disappeared completely and someone's grandmother called out that it was time for Sadiq to begin his journey. The bus to the city left at midnight, and tradition said long goodbyes only made the living harder. But as Halima walked home alone that night, her fingers touching the wooden beads again and again like a prayer, she made her own promise to the Iroko tree: she would wait. She would work. She would be exactly what Sadiq needed her to be so that when he returned, he'd have no reason to look anywhere else. The first year, she worked her father's cassava farm with a dedication that surprised even Mama Binta. Every harvest, she sold her portion at the market and sent half the money to Sadiq's address in Lagos. "For your feeding," she wrote in careful letters. "So you never go hungry while building our future." His letters came back regularly at first, descriptions of the city's chaos and wonder, complaints about his boss's temper, dreams about the carpentry business he'd start once his apprenticeship ended. And always, at the end, "I miss you. I'm counting the days until I can hold you again." The second year, the letters became shorter. Monthly instead of weekly. His complaints about Lagos faded, replaced by excitement about opportunities and connections. Halima told herself this was good. It meant he was succeeding. It meant their waiting had purpose. She increased her work. Took a job helping Mama Rashidi at the local restaurant, waking at 4 a.m. to pound yam and prepare soups for the early market crowd. Every kobo she earned beyond her own survival went to Sadiq. "For your business," she wrote. "For our future." The third year, phone calls replaced letters. Short conversations where Sadiq sounded rushed, distracted, the noise of the city bleeding through the connection. But Halima held on to every word, played them back in her mind during the long hours in the sun. "You sound tired," she said once. "The city is demanding," he replied. "But I'm making progress. Building something real. For us." A pause. Then, "Yes. For us." The fourth year, other girls in the village started getting married. Halima attended their weddings with a smile that felt painted on, deflecting the pitying looks and whispered questions about when Sadiq would return. "Soon," she told them. "He's almost ready." She believed it. Had to believe it. Because the alternative, that she was watering a plant that had already died, was unthinkable. By the fifth year, the calls had dwindled to once a month. His voice sounded different now, smoother, more polished, like he was speaking a language that no longer included her. But when Halima asked when he was coming home, he always had the same answer: "Soon. I just need a little more time." So she gave him time. Gave him money. Gave him 5 years of her youth and labor and unwavering faith. And then, finally, the call came: "I'm coming home next month. Tell Mama to prepare." Halima had screamed with joy, had run to the Iroko tree and pressed her forehead against its bark in gratitude. The waiting was over. The promise was about to be fulfilled. She'd spent the entire month preparing, saved every naira to buy the finest ankara she could afford, practiced the meal she'd cook for him on their first night together, imagined the moment he'd slip a ring on her finger under the same tree where he'd tied the bracelet she still wore every single day. She swept the path twice that morning. Arranged her headscarf perfectly. Stood waiting with her heart racing and her faith intact. And when the car finally arrived, when Sadiq finally stepped out looking like everything she'd dreamed he'd become, she'd been ready to run to him. She just hadn't been ready for him to reach back into that car and pull out a different future. A city woman with painted nails and a smile that said she'd already won a game Halima hadn't known she was playing. The wooden beads on Halima's wrist suddenly felt heavy. Not like a promise anymore. Like chains binding her to a man who'd already walked away. Mama Binta's compound felt too small for the silence that followed Sadiq's announcement. The villagers who'd gathered for celebration stood frozen, their congratulations dying in their throats. Children who'd been chasing each other between the decorated gates stopped mid-game, sensing the adult tension that crackled through the air like approaching lightning. Halima's legs finally remembered how to move. She walked, not ran, though everything in her screamed to run, toward Sadiq and the woman whose existence had just shattered 1,526 days of faith. "Sadiq." Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. "Can we talk? Alone?" Aisha's perfectly painted eyebrow arched above her sunglasses. She looked at Halima the way someone might examine an insect that had landed on their expensive handbag, with mild disgust and the certainty that it would be easy to brush away. "Baby, who is this?" Aisha's voice was smooth, practiced, with the kind of accent that said she'd spent years erasing any hint of village origins from her speech. Sadiq's jaw tightened. For a fraction of a second, something that might have been shame flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the polished indifference Halima had had creeping into his phone calls over the past year. "An old friend," he said. "From before." Before. As if their 5 years existed in some prehistoric era that no longer mattered. As if the Iroko tree had witnessed nothing. As if the wooden beads on Halima's wrist were just decorative trinkets instead of carved promises. "I'm not a friend." Halima's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "Sadiq, tell her who I am. Tell her about the Iroko tree. Tell her about the letters and the money and the 5 years. Halima." Mama Binta appeared at her side, her hand gentle but firm on Halima's elbow. "Perhaps we should go inside and prepare the food. Let Sadiq settle in with his guest." The word guest carried weight. Mama Binta hadn't said fiancé. Hadn't acknowledged Aisha's claim. It was a small rebellion, but in that moment, it felt like the only kindness in the world. Halima let herself be led away, but not before she saw it, the flash of relief on Sadiq's face. He was grateful she was leaving. Grateful to avoid the confrontation. That gratitude hurt more than the betrayal itself. Inside Mama Binta's kitchen, the older woman moved around with practiced efficiency, checking the roasting goat, adjusting the jollof rice, doing the work that needed doing even when the world was ending. Halima stood in the corner, her hands clasped so tightly the wooden beads dug into her skin. "He promised," she whispered. "Under the Iroko tree," he swore. "I know, child." Mama Binta's voice was gentle. "I heard the oath myself. The whole village heard it. Then how? How can he just? The city changes people." Mama Binta stirred the pot with slow, deliberate movements. "It promises them a bigger world, and sometimes they mistake bigger for better. They forget that roots matter. That promises made under sacred trees don't disappear just because you drive away in a fancy car." Through the window, Halima could see Sadiq helping Aisha navigate the compound, her heels sinking into the red earth with each careful step. He was attentive in a way that felt choreographed, performative, like he was proving something to someone, maybe to the village, maybe to Aisha, maybe to himself. "What do I do?" Halima asked. Mama Binta was quiet for a long moment. "Then, you remember who you were before him. And you decide if that girl is worth fighting for, or if she deserves better than a man who forgot her the moment someone shinier came along." But Halima wasn't sure she remembered that girl anymore. 5 years of waiting had erased her, replaced her with someone whose entire identity was built around eventually becoming Sadiq's wife. Without that future, who was she? The wooden beads on her wrist had no answer. 5 years earlier, the Iroko tree had stood at the edge of Halima's village for longer than anyone could remember, its branches thick enough to shade half the market square, its roots so deep the old people said they touched the bones of ancestors. It was under this tree that promises were made, because promises spoken in the shadow of something eternal had weight. Had meaning. Had consequences. "I'll come back for you," Sadiq said, his hands holding Halima so tightly she could feel his pulse racing against her palms. 2 years. Maybe 3. Just long enough to finish my apprenticeship and save enough money. Then I'll return and we'll have the biggest wedding this village has ever seen. Halima nodded, though tears were already blurring her vision. The sun was setting behind the Iroko tree, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that felt too beautiful for a moment this painful. "You promise?" Her voice broke on the word. "I swear it." Sadiq reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth pouch. Inside was a bracelet, simple wooden beads strung together, nothing expensive, nothing impressive. But he'd carved each bead himself during the dry season, working by lamplight after long days in his father's workshop. "Wear this. And when you look at it, remember that every day I'm gone is one day closer to coming home. He tied it around her wrist. The beads were warm from being in his pocket, warm like the promise itself. What if you forget me? Halima whispered. What if the city changes you? The city can't change who I love. Sadiq pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You are my foundation, Halima. My roots. Everything I build in the city, I'm building for us. For the life we'll have together. They stood like that until the sun disappeared completely and someone's grandmother called out that it was time for Sadiq to begin his journey. The bus to the city left at midnight, and tradition said long goodbyes only made the living harder. But as Halima walked home alone that night, her fingers touching the wooden beads again and again like a prayer, she made her own promise to the Iroko tree: she would wait. She would work. She would be exactly what Sadiq needed her to be so that when he returned, he'd have no reason to look anywhere else. The first year, she worked her father's cassava farm with a dedication that surprised even Mama Binta. Every harvest, she sold her portion at the market and sent half the money to Sadiq's address in Lagos. For your feeding, she wrote in careful letters. So you never go hungry while building our future. His letters came back regularly at first, descriptions of the city's chaos and wonder, complaints about his boss's temper, dreams about the carpentry business he'd start once his apprenticeship ended. And always, at the end, I miss you. I'm counting the days until I can hold you again. The second year, the letters became shorter. Monthly instead of weekly. His complaints about Lagos faded, replaced by excitement about opportunities and connections. Halima told herself this was good. It meant he was succeeding. It meant their waiting had purpose. She increased her work. Took a job helping Mama Rashidi at the local restaurant, waking at 4 a.m. to pound yam and prepare soups for the early market crowd. Every kobo she earned beyond her own survival went to Sadiq. For your business, she wrote. For our future. The third year, phone calls replaced letters. Short conversations where Sadiq sounded rushed, distracted, the noise of the city bleeding through the connection. But Halima held on to every word, played them back in her mind during the long hours in the sun. You sound tired, she said once. The city is demanding, he replied. But I'm making progress. Building something real. For us. A pause. Then, yes. For us. The fourth year, other girls in the village started getting married. Halima attended their weddings with a smile that felt painted on, deflecting the pitying looks and whispered questions about when Sadiq would return. Soon, she told them. He's almost ready. She believed it. Had to believe it. Because the alternative, that she was watering a plant that had already died, was unthinkable. By the fifth year, the calls had dwindled to once a month. His voice sounded different now, smoother, more polished, like he was speaking a language that no longer included her. But when Halima asked when he was coming home, he always had the same answer: soon. I just need a little more time. So she gave him time. Gave him money. Gave him 5 years of her youth and labor and unwavering faith. And then, finally, the call came: I'm coming home next month. Tell Mama to prepare. Halima had screamed with joy, had run to the Iroko tree and pressed her forehead against its bark in gratitude. The waiting was over. The promise was about to be fulfilled. She'd spent the entire month preparing, saved every naira to buy the finest ankara she could afford, practiced the meal she'd cook for him on their first night together, imagined the moment he'd slip a ring on her finger under the same tree where he'd tied the bracelet she still wore every single day. She swept the path twice that morning. Arranged her headscarf perfectly. Stood waiting with her heart racing and her faith intact. And when the car finally arrived, when Sadiq finally stepped out looking like everything she'd dreamed he'd become, she'd been ready to run to him. She just hadn't been ready for him to reach back into that car and pull out a different future. A city woman with painted nails and a smile that said she'd already won a game Halima hadn't known she was playing. The wooden beads on Halima's wrist suddenly felt heavy. Not like a promise anymore. Like chains binding her to a man who'd already walked away. The shoebox sat on Halima's sleeping mat, its edges worn soft from being opened and closed countless times over 5 years. Inside, 47 letters, arranged chronologically, each one a snapshot of Sadiq's journey from eager apprentice to the polished stranger who'd arrived with Aisha. Halima hadn't planned to read them again. But sleep was impossible, and the alternative, lying in darkness replaying the moment he'd called her an old friend, was worse than any torture these letters could provide. She pulled out the first one, dated 6 years ago, written on cheap paper in Sadiq's careful handwriting. My dearest Halima, Lagos is even bigger than we imagined. The buildings touch the sky, and the traffic never stops, not even at night. I miss the village silence. I miss the smell of rain on farm soil. I miss you so much it feels like a physical wound. My boss is tough, but I'm learning fast. Every chair I help build, I imagine in our future home. Every skill I master is one step closer to being the man who deserves you. The money you sent arrived safely. It bought me a decent mattress and saved me from sleeping on the workshop floor. You're taking care of me even from so far away. I don't deserve you. All my love, Sadiq. Halima's hands trembled as she set it aside. I don't deserve you. He'd written it so many times in those early letters. She'd always thought he meant it as romantic humility. Now she wondered if it had been a confession she'd been too naive to hear. The letters progressed through the years like a slow disappearing act. The second year's letters were shorter, more focused on his achievements than his feelings. By year 3, they'd become perfunctory updates, passing grades, new opportunities, brief thanks for the money she sent. Then came the letter from 4 years ago that marked the beginning of the end. Halima. Thank you for your recent support. Things are picking up here. I've started getting private commissions. Met some influential people who might help me establish my own workshop someday. I know you've been asking when I'm coming home. Soon. I just need to solidify my position first. Build something real. You understand? Yes. You understand. As if understanding was the same as agreeing. As if patience was infinite and waiting had no cost. The last letter had arrived 2 years ago. After that, only phone calls, brief, surface-level conversations where Sadiq sounded increasingly like a stranger performing the role of boyfriend out of obligation rather than love. A knock on her door interrupted her archaeological dig through false promises. Halima. Her mother's voice was gentle. You have a visitor. Before Halima could respond, Zainab pushed into the small room, followed by 2 other friends from the village, Fatima and Amina. All 3 had the determined expressions of women on a mission. Intervention time, Zainab announced, settling onto the floor. We're not letting you torture yourself alone. I am fine. You're reading his letters at midnight. Fatima pointed at the shoebox. That's the opposite of fine. Amina leaned forward, her expression serious. Halima, we need to talk about what happens next. Tomorrow. The day after. Sadiq and that woman are staying at Mama Binta's for the entire week. You can't avoid them forever. I can try. No. Zainab's voice was firm. You can't. Because avoiding them means hiding, and hiding means shame, and you have absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. The whole village is talking about how I was too stupid to see what was coming. The village is talking about how Sadiq is too cowardly to honor his promises. Fatima cut her off. About how that city woman has no respect for tradition or community. About how Mama Binta looked ready to poison the jollof rice rather than serve it to her son's betrayal. Despite everything, Halima almost smiled. Mama Binta wouldn't. She might. Amina grinned. I saw her face. If looks could kill, Aisha would have dropped dead the moment she stepped out of that car. The brief moment of levity faded as quickly as it came. Halima looked down at the scattered letters, at the physical evidence of promises that had dissolved like sugar in rain. What am I supposed to do? Her voice broke. Everyone expected us to marry. I expected us to marry. My entire life has been organized around eventually becoming his wife. And now what? Who am I if I'm not waiting for Sadiq? The question hung in the small room like smoke. Zainab reached over and gathered up the letters, placed them back in the shoebox with deliberate care. You're Halima. The girl who built a successful cassava farm from nothing. Who worked 2 jobs without complaining. Who kept every promise she ever made, even when it cost her everything. That girl sounds like an idiot. That girl sounds strong. Fatima's eyes were fierce. And tomorrow, you're going to show this entire village exactly how strong you still are. How? By showing up. Amina's voice was quiet but certain. By refusing to hide. By walking through this village with your head high and letting Sadiq and his city woman see exactly what he threw away. It sounded impossible. It sounded like walking into fire and pretending not to burn. But as Halima looked at her friends, at the unwavering support in their eyes, at the anger they were carrying on her behalf, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not healing. Not even hope. Just a stubborn refusal to let Sadiq's betrayal be the thing that finally broke her. She'd survived 5 years of waiting. She could survive whatever came next. Even if next meant facing the man she'd built and the woman who'd stolen him without ever getting her hands dirty. Morning came whether Halima was ready or not. She dressed carefully, not in her finest ankara this time, but in a simple wrapper and blouse that said she had dignity without trying too hard. The wooden beads stayed on her wrist. She told herself it was because removing them would be admitting defeat. Deep down, she knew it was because she wasn't ready to let go of the last physical piece of who they'd been. The village market was already bustling when Halima arrived, setting up her cassava for sale the way she did every market day. Normal routine. Normal life. As if her world hadn't imploded 24 hours ago. The whisper started immediately. Poor girl. I always said she was too trusting. Did you see that city woman? Like something from a magazine. He's an ungrateful dog, that's what he is. Halima kept her head high and her hands busy, arranging her cassava into neat pyramids, focusing on the work because work didn't require her heart to keep beating. Then she felt it, the shift in the market's energy. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned in unison toward the main path. Sadiq and Aisha, walking through the market like visiting dignitaries surveying their kingdom. He dressed down slightly, still too polished for village standards, but at least he traded yesterday's crisp shirt for something more casual. Aisha, however, looked like she'd gotten dressed specifically to prove a point. Her outfit probably cost more than Halima earned in 6 months. Her heels were ridiculous for the uneven market ground, forcing Sadiq to hold her arm and steady her with each step. They were performing. That's what it was, a performance of sophistication, of having transcended this place and these people. Halima watched them approach, her hand stealing on the cassava. Part of her wanted to run. The larger part, the part Zainab had called strong last night, refused to give them the satisfaction. When Sadiq's eyes finally met hers across the market stalls, she saw something flicker in them. Recognition. Discomfort. But not regret. Never regret. Halima. He nodded, the way you might acknowledge a shopkeeper or a distant acquaintance. How's business? The casualness of it was staggering. 5 years condensed into how's business like they were strangers making polite conversation. Steady, she heard herself say. The cassava farm is doing well. That's good. That's good. Aisha wasn't even pretending to be interested in the conversation. Her eyes scanned the market with barely disguised disdain, her nose wrinkling slightly at the smell of dried fish and spices. When her gaze finally landed on Halima's cassava display, something like amusement crossed her face. Baby, we should get going. Aisha tugged on Sadiq's arm. Your mother wanted us back for breakfast, remember? Right. Sadiq looked almost relieved to have an excuse to leave. It was good seeing you, Halima. Take care. They moved on, Aisha stumbling slightly on her impractical heels, Sadiq catching her with the kind of instinctive care that used to be reserved for Halima. Around her, the market slowly came back to life, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Halima felt the weight of pitying stares, heard the renewed whispers. But she also felt something else, a tiny flame of anger beginning to burn through the numbness. How's business? He'd reduced 5 years to a casual market greeting. Had looked at her like she was part of the landscape he'd outgrown, something quaint and rustic that belonged to his past, not his present. She looked down at her hands, calloused, strong, the hands of someone who'd worked for everything she had. Then she looked at the part where Sadiq and Aisha had disappeared, toward Mama Binta's compound where they were staying like honored guests instead of the frauds they were. Zainab materialized at her side, her expression stormy. Did he really just house business you? After everything? He did. I could kill him. Seriously. I could actually commit murder right now. Despite everything, Halima found herself almost smiling. Don't. He's not worth the prison time. Then what is he worth? Because from where I'm standing, he's worth less than the dirt on Aisha's ridiculous shoes. Halima looked at the wooden beads on her wrist, at the careful craftsmanship Sadiq had put into each one 6 years ago when he was still a boy who kept promises. That boy was gone. Maybe he'd never existed at all. Maybe she'd invented him, built him from hope and desperation and the kind of love that was too blind to see it was one-sided. He's worth exactly what I gave him, Halima said quietly. 340,000 naira, 5 years of my life, and every ounce of faith I had in people keeping their promises. So what now? Halima straightened her cassava display, her movements deliberate. Now I figure out how to get my investment back. One way or another. She didn't know what that meant yet. Didn't have a plan beyond continuing to breathe and refusing to hide. But the flame of anger was growing, feeding on every casual dismissal, every performance of sophistication, every moment Sadiq pretended she'd never mattered. And anger, Halima was discovering, was easier to carry than heartbreak. At least anger had somewhere to go. Sometimes, the hardest part of being hurt isn't the pain itself, it's continuing to exist in a world that expects you to be fine. To keep showing up. To smile at people who witnessed your humiliation and pretend their pity doesn't cut as deep as the original wound. If you're still here, still listening to Halima's story, I want you to know that your presence matters. That bearing witness to someone's pain is its own kind of solidarity. Maybe that's all any of us can offer sometimes, the simple act of staying, of seeing, of refusing to look away when things get difficult. Mama Binta's compound had always been a place of warmth and welcome. But the evening of the third day after Sadiq's return, it felt like a courtroom where Halima was on trial for the crime of not being enough. The gathering was supposed to be a casual family dinner, Mama Binta had insisted, had personally come to Halima's house to extend the invitation. You belong here, the older woman had said, her voice firm. You've been part of this family for years. Don't let that woman erase you. So Halima came, wearing her second best wrapper because her best one still smelled like heartbreak from 2 days ago. She brought a pot of her famous egusi soup, the recipe Mama Binta had taught her during the early days with Sadiq, back when everyone assumed their future was certain. Aisha was already holding court when Halima arrived, perched on the best chair in the compound like a queen granting audience. She'd changed clothes 3 times since morning, Halima knew because she'd heard the village women discussing it with mixture of awe and mockery. Currently, she wore something tight and shimmering that looked designed for Lagos nightclubs, not village family dinners. Oh, you cook. Aisha's voice dripped with forced interest when Halima set down her pot. How traditional. The word traditional came out like an insult disguised as a compliment. Halima saw Sadiq shift uncomfortably, but he said nothing. Just sat there, watching this collision of his past and present like a spectator instead of a participant. Mama Binta served the food herself, jollof rice, fried plantain, grilled chicken, and Halima's egusi soup. The meal was a careful balance of village tradition and special occasion, exactly the kind of spread that would have made Halima proud a week ago. Now it just felt like evidence in a trial she was destined to lose. Aisha picked at her food with the kind of delicate disgust that suggested everything on her plate might contain poison. She pushed the egusi soup to the side after one spoonful, her nose wrinkling. Is it too spicy? Mama Binta asked, her voice carefully neutral. Oh no, it's fine. Just very rustic. Aisha smiled, showing perfect teeth that had probably been whitened professionally. I'm used to more refined flavors. You know, fusion cuisine. international. The kind of thing Sadiq and I enjoy in Lagos. Halima's hand tightened on her spoon. She didn't look up, didn't rise to the bait. Just kept eating, even though every bite tasted like sand. Halima's egusi is the best in the village, Mama Binta said, still creeping into her voice. Sadiq used to say it reminded him of home. Used to, Aisha emphasized, reaching over to touch Sadiq's arm possessively. People's tastes evolve. Sadiq has experienced so much in Lagos. Haven't you, baby? All those nice restaurants I took you to. Took you to. The words hung in the air, pregnant with implication. Sadiq's face colored slightly, but still, he said nothing. Halima, that wrapper is interesting, Aisha continued, her eyes scanning Halima's outfit with the precision of a predator identifying weaknesses. Very authentic. I love how you village girls hold on to tradition. It's so pure. So uncomplicated. The condescension was a physical thing now, thick enough to choke on. Around the compound, other family members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even Sadiq's father, usually oblivious to emotional undercurrents, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Your accent is interesting too, Aisha continued, warming to her performance. So genuine. When Sadiq and I are in Lagos, people sometimes can't even tell he's from the village. He's learned to speak properly. No offense, of course. Halima set down her spoon with deliberate care. She could feel every eye on her, waiting to see if she'd break, if she'd cry, if she'd give Aisha the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, she smiled. None taken. I'm proud of where I'm from. Proud of how I speak. Proud of the work that gave me these hands. She held up her calloused palms. These are honest hands. They built something real. For the first time since arriving, Aisha's smile faltered slightly. But she recovered quickly, turning to Sadiq with exaggerated sweetness. Baby, didn't you say your workshop in Lagos is almost ready? Tell them about our plans. Our plans. Halima watched Sadiq's face, searching for any sign that he remembered whose money had funded those plans. Whose sacrifice had made his Lagos life possible. We are opening a furniture showroom in Lekki, Sadiq said, his voice carrying forced enthusiasm. High-end pieces for expatriates and corporate clients. Aisha has connections that will help us land some major contracts. Connections, Halima repeated softly. How fortunate. Mama Binta stood abruptly. Halima, help me bring out the dessert. In the kitchen, away from Aisha's performance and Sadiq's cowardice, Mama Binta pulled Halima into a fierce embrace. That woman is poison, the older woman hissed. And my son is a fool for not seeing it. Maybe he sees it perfectly, Halima whispered. Maybe he just doesn't care. Halima found it the next morning while sweeping Mama Binta's compound, a task she'd performed dozens of times over the years, back when she'd still believed this place would eventually become her home. The clay pot lay in pieces behind the kitchen, partially hidden by banana leaves. It was small, unremarkable to anyone who didn't know its history. But Halima knew. She'd bought it 4 years ago from the best potter in the neighboring village, had spent a month's earnings on it because Sadiq had mentioned once, casually, that he wanted something to store his wood-carving tools. She'd sent it to Lagos wrapped in layers of cloth, had written a letter explaining that every time he reached for a tool, he should remember she was thinking of him. He'd never mentioned receiving it. She'd assumed it had gotten lost in transit, or that he'd been too busy to acknowledge it. Now she understood. He'd brought it back to the village and thrown it away. Halima knelt in the dirt, picking up the broken pieces, and felt something crack inside her chest that had nothing to do with clay. This wasn't just a discarded gift. This was a message: you and everything you gave me are worthless. What are you doing? Aisha's voice. Of course. Halima looked up to find the city woman watching her with undisguised amusement, her phone in hand like she might take a photo of this moment, village girl on her knees in the dirt, clutching broken pottery. Nothing, Halima said, standing. Just cleaning. How domestic. Aisha stepped closer, her designer sandals navigating the compound with careful distaste. You know, it's actually kind of sad. The way you're still hanging around here, doing chores like you're part of the family. Don't you have any pride? The pieces of the clay pot cut into Halima's palms. She welcomed the pain, it gave her something to feel besides the numbness spreading through her chest. I have plenty of pride, she said quietly. I also have history here. Roots. Something you clearly don't understand. Aisha laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Roots. Is that what you call it? Sadiq calls it something else. He told me all about you, you know. About how you clung to him even when it was obvious he'd outgrown this place. How you kept sending him money like you could buy his loyalty. I wasn't buying anything. I was supporting someone I loved. You were being pathetic. Aisha's smile was venomous now, all pretense of civility abandoned. Did you really think a man like Sadiq, successful, ambitious, sophisticated, would come back here and marry a village girl who smells like cassava and desperation? The words were designed to cut. They succeeded. But Halima had spent 3 days absorbing cuts. She was starting to build scar tissue. What does he smell like? Halima asked. Because 3 days ago, when he introduced you, I caught a whiff of something familiar. Smelled like a man being controlled. Like someone who traded his freedom for shortcuts. Aisha's eyes flashed. You don't know anything about our relationship. I know he can't look me in the eye. I know he lets you speak for him like he's lost his own voice. I know the boy who carved wooden beads by lamplight has been replaced by someone who breaks clay pots instead of making promises. That boy was poor and desperate. Aisha stepped closer, her voice dropping to something more dangerous. I gave him opportunities that village girl loyalty never could. Connections. Capital. A future that doesn't involve dirt and cassava farms. You gave him money. Please. I gave him access to a world you can't even imagine. And what did he give you? The question landed like a stone. Aisha's smile faltered for just a moment, long enough for Halima to see something underneath the polished performance. Something that looked almost like uncertainty. He gave me his heart, Aisha said, but her voice carried a forced quality now. He chose me. Did he? Or did you choose him, and he was too weak to say no? Before Aisha could respond, Sadiq appeared around the corner of the compound, his expression wary. What's going on? Nothing, baby. Aisha's demeanor shifted instantly, becoming soft and vulnerable. I was just chatting with your friend. But I'm not feeling well. Can we go back inside? Sadiq's eyes moved from Aisha to Halima, taking in the broken pottery still clutched in Halima's hands. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something that might have been recognition crossed his face. Then it was gone. He put his arm around Aisha and led her away, leaving Halima alone with the pieces of something that could never be put back together. She looked down at the shards of clay, at her own hands bleeding slightly where the sharp edges had cut her skin. The wooden beads on her wrist caught the morning light, their presence suddenly unbearable. This time, Halima's fingers didn't hesitate. She untied the bracelet and let it fall among the broken pieces of the pot. Some promises, once broken, weren't worth keeping the evidence. The village council meeting was a tradition older than the Iroko tree, a monthly gathering where elders settled disputes, announced important decisions, and maintained the social fabric that held the community together. Halima hadn't planned to attend. She'd spent the 3 days since finding the broken pot avoiding Mama Binta's compound, avoiding the market when she knew Sadiq and Aisha might be there, avoiding everything except her cassava farm and the slowly solidifying rage in her chest. But Mama Binta had come to her house that morning, her face set with determination. The elders are announcing Sadiq's engagement today, she said. Making it official. If you don't come, if you don't speak, they'll assume you've accepted it. They'll assume you've moved on. Maybe I should move on. Do you want to? Mama Binta's eyes were fierce. Or do you want justice? Because those are two different things, child. And you deserve to choose which one matters more. So Halima went, wearing her best ankara, the one from the day of Sadiq's arrival, now washed and pressed. The one that had witnessed her humiliation. She wore it like armor. The meeting took place under the Iroko tree, because important things always happen in the shadow of something eternal. The entire village had gathered. This was entertainment as much as official business, and everyone wanted to witness what happened when old promises collided with new realities. Sadiq and Aisha sat at the front, looking like visiting dignitaries. Aisha had somehow managed to dress even more inappropriately, her outfit drawing disapproving looks from the older women. But she wore their disapproval like a badge of honor, her chin high, her hand possessively on Sadiq's knee. Chief Adeyemi, the eldest council member, stood to speak. His voice carried the weight of 70 years of witnessing village drama. We are here to acknowledge the engagement of Sadiq Okafor to Miss Aisha Adelik of Lagos. This union will be formalized according to both traditional and modern customs. Does anyone have objections that should be heard before we proceed with the blessing? The silence that followed felt alive, charged with expectation. Every eye turned to Halima. She stood slowly, her legs steadier than she'd expected. I object. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Aisha's expression turned sharp with contempt. Sadiq's face drained of color. On what grounds? Chief Adeyemi asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. On the grounds that 5 years ago, under this same tree, Sadiq Okafor made a sacred promise to me. He swore before witnesses that he would return and marry me. He accepted my support, financial and emotional, for 5 years based on that promise. And now he wishes to formalize a union with someone else without ever formally releasing me from the commitment he made. That's absurd, Aisha interjected, standing. Whatever promises were made are clearly null and void. Sadiq has chosen to move forward with his life. You can't hold him hostage to childhood fantasies. I'm not holding him hostage. Halima's voice remained calm, controlled. I'm asking him to honor his word or formally break his promise in front of the same witnesses who had him make it. I'm asking for acknowledgement. For closure. For the respect of having our history recognized instead of erased. Chief Adeyemi turned to Sadiq. Is this true? Did you make such a promise? Sadiq stood, his polished Lagos demeanor cracking under the weight of village tradition and uncomfortable truth. That was years ago. Things change. People change. I'm not the same person I was when I left. Did you or did you not make a promise under this tree? The chief's voice was sharp now. Yes. But did this woman support you during your time in Lagos? Financially and otherwise? Sadiq's jaw tightened. Halima could see him calculating, trying to find a way to minimize, to rewrite history into something less damning. But too many people knew the truth. Letters had been seen. Money transfers had been witnessed. She helped me, he admitted finally. But I never asked her to. You never refused, Halima cut in, her voice rising for the first time. You never said, don't send money, I have someone else. You never said, don't wait, I've changed my mind. You took everything I gave and let me believe it was building our future. And now you stand here and try to pretend I'm the unreasonable one for expecting you to at least acknowledge what you're walking away from. You're being dramatic, Aisha said, her voice dripping with disdain. This is exactly why Sadiq needs a woman who understands the modern world. You're stuck in village mentality, clinging to outdated traditions. Silence. Chief Adeyemi's voice cracked like thunder. You are a guest here, not a member of this community. You do not speak in council unless invited. Aisha's mouth snapped shut, her face flushing with anger and humiliation. The chief turned back to Sadiq. You have a choice, young man. Honor your original promise or formally and publicly release Halima from the commitment you made. But you do not get to pretend it never existed. You do not get to erase 5 years of another person's life because it's inconvenient for your new situation. This is ridiculous, Sadiq said, but his voice lacked conviction. I am a man of the world now. I have responsibilities, opportunities that require a certain kind of partner. Say it. Halima's voice cut through his excuses. Say what you mean. Say I'm not good enough. Say I'm too village, too traditional, too marked by the work I did to support you. Say you need someone sophisticated who didn't sacrifice anything to help you succeed. Say I smell like the market and the cassava farm and everything you're embarrassed to remember about where you came from. Sadiq's face went pale. Around them, the village watched in breathless silence. Go ahead, Halima continued, her voice breaking but her stance unwavering. Give me that much honesty at least. Tell me I'm just a girl of the soil, and you're a man of the world now. Tell me I don't fit your level. For a long moment, Sadiq just stood there, caught between his past and his present, between tradition and ambition, between the easy lie and the hard truth. Then he spoke, and his words carved themselves into Halima's memory like scars. You're right. You don't fit my level. I've outgrown this place, these expectations, this version of myself that you keep trying to hold on to. I need a partner who matches where I am now, not where I was 5 years ago. I'm sorry if that's painful, but it's the truth. The gathered crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Mama Binta looked ready to strike her own son. Several elders shook their heads in disgust. But Halima felt something unexpected, relief. The truth, however cruel, was cleaner than the careful dismissals and casual erasures. At least now she knew. At least now everyone knew. Thank you, she said quietly, for finally being honest. She turned to Chief Adeyemi. I withdraw my objection. Let him marry his city woman. Let him build his sophisticated life with someone who never had to get her hands dirty to help him succeed. I release him from his promise, since clearly he released himself from it long ago without bothering to tell me. Halima, Mama Binta started. It's fine. Halima smiled, though tears were streaming down her face now. It's better this way. Now I know exactly what 5 years of loyalty is worth to him. Now I know exactly what kind of man I wasted my youth on. And now I can stop waiting for someone who was never coming back. She walked away from the Iroko tree, from the gathered village, from the boy she'd loved and the man he'd become. Behind her, she heard Aisha's triumphant voice, heard Sadiq's weak attempt at explanation, heard the village's collective disappointment in a son who'd forgotten that rising up didn't require stepping on the people who'd lifted you. But Halima kept walking. Because sometimes the only power left was the power to live with your dignity intact. And if her dignity was all she had left, she was determined to keep it. The revelation came 3 days later, not from Halima but from the village gossip network, that intricate web of information that moved faster than any modern technology. Zainab brought the news to Halima's house, her face flushed with the kind of vindication that comes from being proven right when you wished you'd been wrong. You need to hear this, she said, bursting through the door without knocking. I just came from the market. Mama Chidi's cousin lives in Lagos, and she knows people who know Aisha. Halima looked up from the fabric she was mending, one of the few productive tasks she could manage in the numb days following the council meeting. I don't want to hear about. Aisha is broke. Completely bankrupt. She used to be wealthy, ran some kind of import business, but it collapsed 6 months ago. She's drowning in debt. The words took a moment to penetrate. Halima set down her needle. What? It gets better. Zainab sat down, her eyes bright with fierce satisfaction. She met Sadiq at some business event. Found out he was from a village, found out his family had land. That's when she started the relationship. She's not after Sadiq the carpenter, she's after the family land that Mama Binta's husband left behind. Land that's worth millions if developed properly. Halima's mind raced, pieces clicking together. Aisha's expensive clothes, probably bought before the bankruptcy. Her desperate need to cement the engagement quickly. Her contempt for the village that masked her actual need for what it could provide. She's using him, Halima whispered. She's using him, Zainab confirmed. And he's too blinded by her sophistication and city polish to see it. Or maybe he sees it and doesn't care. Maybe being controlled by a sophisticated woman feels better than being supported by a village girl. Does he know about her bankruptcy? According to Mama Chidi's cousin, Aisha has been very careful to hide it. She's been funding their lifestyle with borrowed money, credit cards, loans from friends. She's building a house of cards, and Sadiq is going to be inside it when it collapses. Halima should have felt triumphant. Should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt a strange emptiness. Even knowing that Aisha was a fraud, that their relationship was built on deception, didn't erase the fact that Sadiq had chosen it over honesty. I need to tell Mama Binta, Zainab said. The elders should know before they give their final blessing. No. What? Halima, you can't let him walk into this blind. He made his choice. Halima's voice was flat. He chose sophistication over substance. He chose appearances over truth. He looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't good enough for his new level. If that new level is built on debt and deception, that's his lesson to learn. But Mama Binta will lose her land if this goes forward. Halima stood, pacing her small room. I know. But if I tell her, if I expose Aisha, what happens? Sadiq comes crawling back. Says he made a mistake. Begs forgiveness. Maybe that's what he deserves. A chance to make it right. Halima shook her head. I don't want his apologies. I don't want him crawling back after being humiliated. I want him to have exactly what he chose. I want him to marry Aisha and discover that sophisticated women can lie just as easily as village girls can love. I want him to learn that polish doesn't equal substance, and that the girl he stepped on to elevate himself was worth more than every connection Aisha could ever provide. So you're just going to let it happen? Let him destroy his mother's legacy. Halima was quiet for a long moment. Then, tell Mama Binta. Let her make the choice. But I'm done saving Sadiq from himself. I'm done protecting someone who wouldn't protect me. Zainab studied her friend's face, searching for something. You've changed, she said finally. In the past week, something in you has shifted. I had to, Halima said simply. The girl who waited 5 years for promises to be kept. She died at that council meeting. What's left is someone who needs to figure out how to build a life from the ruins. After Zainab left, Halima sat in the growing darkness, thinking about Aisha's bankruptcy and Sadiq's blindness and the complicated mathematics of betrayal. She thought about the 340,000 naira she'd sent him over 5 years, money she'd earned through exhausting labor and ruthless self-denial. Money that was gone. Spent on building someone else. Invested in a future that would never exist. But maybe that was the final lesson. Maybe you couldn't build other people. You could only build yourself and hope that the people you loved would value the foundation you'd laid. Sadiq hadn't valued it. Had stepped off the foundation Halima built and onto something that looked shinier but had no substance beneath the surface. And when he fell, because he would fall, the mathematics of deception guaranteed it, Halima wouldn't be there to catch him. She'd be too busy building her own life. Finally. Belatedly. But building it nonetheless. The decision came to Halima at dawn, 3 weeks after the council meeting, while she was working the cassava farm that had been her entire world for 5 years. She couldn't stay. Not in the village where every corner held memories of who she'd been when she believed in promises. Not where every pitying look from neighbors reminded her of how publicly she'd been rejected. But more than that, she didn't want to stay. The girl who'd defined herself by waiting was dead. The woman who remained needed space to figure out who she was when she wasn't building someone else's dreams. She sold her portion of the cassava farm to her cousin for less than it was worth. She needed quick cash, not negotiations. The sale brought in 40,000 naira. Added to the pathetic savings she'd managed to keep for herself over the years, she had 63,000 total. It wasn't much. It wasn't even close to what she'd given Sadiq. But it was enough to start. Mama Binta cried when Halima came to say goodbye. The older woman had confronted Aisha about the bankruptcy rumors, had demanded proof of financial stability before allowing the marriage to proceed. The wedding had been postponed indefinitely, and Sadiq had stopped speaking to his mother, choosing Aisha's version of reality over uncomfortable truths. You're the daughter I deserved, Mama Binta said, holding Halima tight. And my son is a fool who traded gold for costume jewelry. Maybe he'll learn, Halima said. Maybe he won't. Either way, it's not my lesson to teach anymore. She left the village on a Tuesday morning, the same day of the week Sadiq had left 5 years ago. The parallel wasn't lost on her, but she refused to see it as bitter symmetry. This was different. She was leaving to build herself, not to build someone else. The bus to Lagos was crowded and uncomfortable. Halima clutched her small bag containing everything she owned, 2 changes of clothes, her savings, and a notebook where she'd started writing down ideas. Plans. Possibilities. She'd enrolled in evening classes at a community school in Lagos. Basic business management, accounting, literacy support. She'd also secured a room in a shared apartment in Mushin through a cousin's friend, tiny, barely more than a closet, but hers. And she'd found a job at a textile shop in Baliga Market, selling fabrics to women who haggled with the kind of fierce determination Halima recognized from her own years at the village market. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't sophisticated. But it was a foundation, and this time, she was building it under her own feet. The first month in Lagos was brutal. The city was exactly as overwhelming as Sadiq's early letters had described, loud, chaotic, indifferent to individual suffering. Halima worked 12-hour days at the textile shop, attended classes 3 evenings a week, and spent her rare free time studying under the dim bulb in her rented room. She was exhausted constantly. She missed the village more than she'd expected, missed the familiar rhythms, the community, the simplicity of knowing everyone's name. But she didn't miss the pity. Didn't miss being defined by someone else's betrayal. Didn't miss the constant reminders of who she'd been when she believed loyalty would be rewarded. 3 months in, her employer at the textile shop, Mama Ngozi, a formidable woman who'd built her business from nothing, pulled Halima aside. "You're good with customers," she said. "Better than girls who've been here for years. You see what they need before they know they need it." "Thank you, Ma. I'm expanding. Opening a second shop in Ikeja. I need someone to manage it. Someone trustworthy. Someone who understands that business is built on relationships, not just transactions." Halima's heart raced. "Ma, I've only been here 3 months. And in 3 months, you've proven more than girls who've been here 3 years. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering opportunity. But it comes with responsibility. Long hours. Hard decisions. The kind of work that builds character or breaks people. I take it," Halima said without hesitation. Mama Ngozi smiled. "I thought you might. You have the eyes of someone who's already been broken and decided to rebuild stronger. Those are the only people worth investing in." The new position came with better pay, a small commission on sales, and the first genuine respect Halima had felt since before Sadiq's return to the village. She moved into a slightly better room. Bought new clothes that fit the person she was becoming instead of the person she'd been. Continued her evening classes with renewed focus. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, the woman in the mirror started looking familiar again. Not the girl who'd waited under the Iroko tree. Someone different. Someone who'd walked through fire and come out forged instead of destroyed. 6 months after leaving the village, Halima received a letter from Zainab. The wedding had finally happened. Sadiq and Aisha had married in a small Lagos ceremony without waiting for traditional village blessings. Mama Binta hadn't attended. Most of the village had chosen silence over support. And already, cracks were showing. Aisha's creditors were circling. The furniture showroom had failed to materialize. Sadiq looked tired in the wedding photos Zainab had included, not happy tired, but defeated tired. The kind that came from realizing you traded everything for nothing. Halima looked at the photos for a long time. Searching for something. Satisfaction maybe. Vindication. Instead, she felt nothing but distance. These were strangers wearing familiar faces. Their story had nothing to do with hers anymore. She filed the letter away and went back to studying her accounting textbooks, planning the expansion of her newest business idea, her own small textile store, funded by careful saving and Mama Ngozi's mentorship. The girl who'd measured her worth by someone else's promises was gone. The woman who remained was just getting started. If you've walked this far with Halima, through the betrayal, the humiliation, the slow climb back to herself, then you understand something profound about survival. It's not about the person who hurt us learning their lesson. It's about us learning ours. It's about choosing, every single day, to build something that can't be taken away. Thank you for witnessing this transformation. For understanding that the end of one story can be the beginning of another, better one. 2 years later, Halima drove through her village in a modest but respectable car, a used Honda she'd bought outright after her textile business had expanded to 3 locations across Lagos. She hadn't planned to come back. But Mama Binta had called, her voice weak with illness, asking to see the daughter of her heart one more time. And despite everything, despite the memories and the pain and the work she'd done to build a life separate from this place, Halima couldn't refuse. The village looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she'd just grown larger. She parked near the market, stepped out in her simple but well-made business attire, and felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward her. The whispers started immediately, but this time they carried a different tone. Surprise. Respect. The kind of assessment that calculated success and found it genuine. Mama Binta was sitting outside her compound when Halima arrived, thinner than she'd been but still possessing that fierce strength that had sustained her through her son's betrayal. Look at you, the older woman said, tears streaming down her face. Look at what you've become. I learned from the best, Halima said, embracing her gently. You taught me that foundation matters more than facade. They talked for hours, about Lagos, about business, about the life Halima had built from the ruins of her broken promises. Mama Binta listened with the pride of someone witnessing their greatest lesson learned by their best student. Sadiq asks about you, Mama Binta said finally, her voice heavy with something that might have been shame. He knows you're doing well. Knows you've succeeded in the same city where his life fell apart. How is he? Halima asked, more from politeness than genuine curiosity. Broken. Aisha left him 6 months after the wedding, once she'd secured loan agreements using the family land as collateral. He's fighting legal battles now, trying to prevent her from seizing property that's been in our family for generations. He works odd carpentry jobs to pay for lawyers. Lives in a single room in Mushin, not far from where you started. Halima should have felt vindication. Should have felt the sharp satisfaction of cosmic justice. Instead, she felt only a distant sadness for the boy who'd carved wooden beads by lamplight, who'd been consumed by the man who needed to prove he was better than his origins. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. Not for him, exactly. But for what could have been if he'd chosen differently. He wants to see you, Mama Binta said. He's here. In the village. Came back 2 days ago, broken and desperate. Before Halima could respond, a shadow fell across the compound entrance. Sadiq stood there, and Halima barely recognized him. The polish was gone. The sophisticated veneer had cracked away, revealing someone who looked carved out, emptied, hollowed by consequences he'd never seen coming. Halima, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Can we talk? Mama Binta stood. I leave you two alone. No, Halima said gently. Stay. Whatever Sadiq has to say, he can say it in front of witnesses. I'm done with private conversations and hidden truths. Sadiq flinched but didn't leave. He moved closer, his movement carrying none of the confidence she remembered. You were right, he said. About everything. About Aisha, about what I threw away, about choosing appearances over substance. I was a fool. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too blind and too arrogant to see its value. Yes, Halima agreed calmly. You were. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. I'm begging. Halima, I need a second chance. She finished for him. Someone to rebuild you. A foundation to stand on now that yours has crumbled. Hope flickered in his eyes. Yes. Exactly. We could start over. I've learned my lesson. I know your value now. Do you? Halima stood, and something in her posture made him take a step back. Because I'm not sure you do. You know I succeeded. You know I built something real. But do you know why? Because you're strong. Because you're smart and capable and because I stopped building other people and started building myself. Her voice was quiet but carried the weight of 2 years hard-won wisdom. Because I learned that my value doesn't depend on someone else recognizing it. That I don't need to prove myself worthy of love by destroying myself in service of it. She walked closer to him, close enough to see the desperation in his eyes, the hope that she might be the solution to his current disaster. You look broke, she said softly, using his words from the council meeting. Your shoes are worn. Your clothes are wrinkled. You smell like desperation and regret. And I need a partner who matches my level. Not where I was 2 years ago when you rejected me. Where I am now. Where I'm going. The words landed exactly as intended. She saw him recognize them, saw the moment he understood he was tasting his own poison. That's cruel, he whispered. That's honest, she corrected. You taught me that honesty matters more than kindness. That sometimes the truth has to cut deep to be heard. So that's it. You won't even consider. There's nothing to consider. You made your choice under the Iroko tree when you publicly humiliated me. When you told me I wasn't good enough for your sophisticated life. I've made mine now. I choose myself. I choose the life I've built without you. I choose forward over backward. She turned to leave, then paused. Thank you, though. For what? For breaking your promise. For shattering every illusion I had about love and loyalty and sacrifice. Because those broken pieces, I used them to build something better. Something that can't betray me. Something that's actually mine. Halima walked back to her car, her head high, her heart finally, fully free. Behind her, she heard Sadiq call her name one more time, heard the desperation and loss in his voice. She didn't turn around. Didn't look back. Just kept walking, the way she'd learned to do 2 years ago when she'd left this village and its broken promises behind. The drive back to Lagos felt different this time. Lighter. Like she'd finally set down a weight she hadn't realized she'd still been carrying. She thought about the girl who'd stood on the swept path 1526 days into waiting, watching a car approach with her heart full of hope. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned that the only person worth waiting for was the person you became while building yourself back up. Halima merged onto the Lagos-bound highway and pressed the accelerator, leaving the village and its ghost behind. Not running away this time. Just driving forward. Finally. Completely.